The night before Athena's birthday had come. Nobody in Athens slept on that night. Around every temple door the street was loud with singing voices and dancing feet. It was bright with fluttering robes and flaring torches, and sweet with waving smoke of incense. In front of one door danced a chorus of men. They were in armor, as if they had come from a fight. The bronze glinted in the torchlight. People pressed about in a close circle. Their eager eyes watched the dancers. Slaves held the smoking torches above their masters' heads. The voices that had shouted the battle cry were now singing, "Of Pallas Athena, the savior of cities, I sing, dread goddess, who has in her charge the works of war, of falling towns and of battles and battle din, who saves the hosts as they go to the fight or return. Oh, hail, Athena! And give to us joy and good luck." "Athena," shouted the crowd. "And we are her chosen warriors," said one man to another. "Come to the altar of Hera," said a man to his friend. "My daughter dances there with the other priestesses." They struggled through the moving crowds in the crooked streets. They groped their way through the dark, empty places. At last they came to another crowd, with the glare of torches around it. Flames leaped up, smoke waved above 1,000 heads with their white fillets. Behind were the white temple columns, and at each side stretched the dark street. Here young girls were singing and helping the song with whirling bodies and clashing cymbals. "Of fairest Athena I sing, the grey-eyed, the wise. She was not born as others are born. She did not grow as others have grown, but she sprang full-grown, full-armed, from the head of Zeus, and the gods stood about and watched with awe. Quickly she leaped from the head of the counselor Zeus, shaking her spear and flashing her mail till high Olympus trembled in dread. And the wide earth shook below at the maiden's strength, and the dark sea boiled and broke in foam. Apollo, the glorious god, reined in his steeds till the maiden laid off her armor of gold, while her father watched proudly, the counselor Zeus. So hail to thee, goddess Athena, daughter of Zeus. So hail to thee, savior, the grey-eyed, the wise." In the marketplace, too, thousands of torches flared and smoked. A great space in the center was roped off and empty. But watchers pressed against the rope and crowded together all the way back to steps and porches. Some had even climbed to the low roofs and were looking down on the unsteady lights and moving heads. At last a chorus of boys began singing and dancing in the space roped off. They told the story of the naming of Athens, how in the olden days Athena and Poseidon together came to the city. They went to the Acropolis, where all men were met to buy and sell and talk. Those gods found a nameless town. Each said, "Call your city after me, and I will give you a precious gift." Then Poseidon struck the rock with his trident. Out leaped the first horse, and the people were afraid. But Athena made an olive tree shoot softly up, and the people said, "We will have Athena for our goddess." So Athens was named. The shrill music of a flute pierced far past the market. As the boys of the chorus sang to its sound, they acted the story: Zeus's headache, the swing of Hephaestus's hammer, Athena's leaping out, the raised hands and backward steps of the surprised gods, the glad running of Iris to tell the news. At the end of the dance the noise of clapping hands and the cries of "Good, good," carried far through the open air. "The lads did well, Lacon," said a man. "I saw your son among them. He is a handsome boy." "Every day for a month," replied his father, "he has put an offering upon Athena's altar and has prayed for grace in the dance." All night long the city was full of prayer and holy song and sacred dance. No god was forgotten. To every one was paid the thanks that was due him for yellow grain fields, or heavy vines, or thick-fleeced sheep, or plentiful rain, or warm sunshine, or good sailing winds, or health, or strength in the games. One chorus sang, "Come hither, Olympian gods, to our dance, and glorify it with your presence. In sacred Athens visit the city's hearth, where incense always burns, and visit her famous marketplace. Accept our violet-twisted crowns and drink offerings of spring-gathered herbs." As the morning began to come, the songs and dances ceased. The groups thinned before the temples. People snatched hasty breakfasts. By the time the sun was up, all of Athens was deserted, except the broad street of the Ceramicus. Here all was laughter and shouting and pushing. Youths on restless horses, warriors in full armor, old men in spotless linen himmetions, women in soft colors, jostled one another in the middle of the street. "Your horse is tramping on my himmetion," cried a dandy to a young warrior on horseback. "Why is your himmetion in the street, then?" the warrior laughed back. "Is this a place for trailing robes?" "A soldier's chlamys is in no danger of being trampled upon," called another young warrior teasingly. "Do you not see that a himmetion is more becoming to our friend Aratus?" laughed someone else. "You will not find him in a soldier's cape if he can help it. Off with you, Aratus. See, there are the other women. Off with you," and he pushed him with his spear, while the crowd laughed. The porticos at the side of the road were filled with men, old and young. A father was lifting up his little son. "See," he said, pointing to a warrior, "there is the man who got the crown for bravery in our last battle. The arm that is under his chlamys has a deep wound. A victor! A victor!" The shout was louder than all the noise of laughter and talk. A dozen young men were pushing people to right and left. They had a man on their shoulders and were running ahead of him, while he swayed and laughed above people's heads. Everybody turned to look, and then shouted his name. Women and girls were crowded around the doors of the sacred storehouse, from which priests were bringing out platters and vases of gold. The priests put them into the hands of the waiting girls and women. Heralds were hurrying about among the crowd, shouting orders. The Panathenaic procession was forming. On the porch of a little temple was standing a small group of men, less noisy than the rest. "This festival is one of the best things in our country," one man said. "Here are fishermen from the seashore, timber cutters from Hymettus, quarrymen from Pentelicus, shepherds from the mountains, grape growers from the hills, farmers from the plains, poets and musicians from the streets of our city, guests from the colonies. All are talking together, finding out new things, making new friends. All are learning to call Athens mother." Just then a herald came up to the men. "We are ready for the officers of the city," he said. "Will you come, Pericles?" The man who had been speaking stepped down from the porch. He turned to his friend. "I will see you on the Acropolis, Phidias," he said. In a little while, the procession was ready. Flute players and trumpeters were first. Behind them young men were leading the cattle for the sacrifice. There were 100 animals, the fattest, the most beautiful, in all Attica. Their sleek sides shone with careful rubbing. Gold tips glistened on their horns. Garlands of flowers swayed from their slow-moving heads. And there were 100 rams, with washed wool and hanging garlands. Behind these animals walked the priests of Athens, in their long, old-fashioned robes, rich in color and glistening with gold embroidery. Wreaths of flowers crowned their heads, and garlands hung loose over their shoulders and arms. Then came people carrying the holy dishes, to serve Athena's feast on the Acropolis. There were women with baskets of bread and silver plates of cakes, young men with great black and red vases of wine, girls balancing on their heads baskets of flowers and fruit. More than 1,000 people followed with gifts for Athena, little statues of terracotta, dishes of gold, bronze tripods, marble tablets with carved letters, gold-embroidered himations, necklaces of amethyst, carved golden bracelets set with coral. And best of all the gifts was the great robe for Athena's statue. It hung as a sail in a beautiful ship. The boat rolled on hidden wheels, as though the wind itself carried it. The great yellow robe of soft wool waved gently. Athena and the giants in gold embroidery seemed to be moving in battle. Behind the robe came the proudest men in Athens, the victors in the Panathenaic Games. There was the best jumper, the best disc thrower, the fastest runner, the best boxer, the best wrestler. The winner in the chariot race rode in his chariot and reined in his nervous horses. There was the winner of the torch race, with his torch still burning. The band of youths who had won the war dance walked together, with swords in hand and helmets on their heads. The procession marched between rows of low houses. On the flat roofs stood people looking down. As the animals and their leaders and the bearers of gifts passed, the people on the housetops waved their himations and threw down flowers, but when the victors came, the men shouted, and the women leaned over and showered them with blossoms. The victors, they cried. And the victors looked up and smiled and caught at the flowers. There is the beauty of youth, men thought, as they looked at these victors. But age, too, is beautiful. See those old men, with bodies well trained, still strong and straight. In their faces shine not youth, but wisdom and goodness. For the handsomest old men of Athens had been chosen to walk behind the victors. They carried branches of Athena's olive. Young warriors on prancing horses followed them. The wind lifted their bright capes and showed their shining armor beneath. After them came all the warriors of Athens, some on horse, some on foot. Some carried fresh wounds from late battles. Again the shouts of the watchers rang loud. "No wonder Athens has luck in battle," said one of the visitors. "See the number of her warriors, the richness of their armor." No freeman of Athens was willing to be left out on this great day. "I will walk in Athena's procession, to do honor to my goddess and my city," every man said. So, in their most beautiful himations, men walked quietly together, and their wives and daughters followed. Beside these women were others, carrying parasols and little stools. They were foreigners who had come to live in Athens. "We are foreigners in the city," they said, "but we love it. We are willing on this day to make ourselves servants, if we may walk in the greatest and most beautiful procession of all Greece." Not only the housetops were filled with people looking on. In open places, platforms had been built, and they were filled with gay men and women. People stood in the porches of temples or crowded the corners of the marketplace. They were visitors from all the world, come to see this great festival. Athenian women were there who could not take the long walk, and fathers and mothers who were too old to go, and children who were too young. Houses and columns and statues were hung with garlands of flowers. The city would not be so beautiful again for 4 years, until the next Panathenaic festival. In the distance, all the time, ahead of the procession, the Acropolis arose. The great bronze Athena watched her people come. Her shining spear seemed to beckon them. Now they had left the marketplace and were winding up the steep front of the Acropolis. All foreigners had stayed behind. Only freemen of Athens might set foot on the Acropolis, men and women with heroes for ancestors. They looked up lovingly at the tall bronze Athena. The people had had that statue made at the end of the Persian Wars. They had found on the field of Marathon many bronze helmets and swords and spear points of the Persians. They had gathered them together and had taken them to Athens and given them to Phidias, saying, "Athena has helped us in this war. We wish to honor her. You are a great artist. Make us a statue of her from this bronze. We will put it upon the Acropolis. Then she can look over Athens. We shall live under her eyes. Give her a shield and a helmet and a spear, as though she were ready for battle. Make her tall, so that sailors in their ships can see her shining spear and helmet as they come into Athens, then they will know that the strong Athena guards our city." Before the Persian War, temples and statues had covered the Acropolis. Now it was littered with broken stone and wooden storehouses. Rough rock altars stood up here and there. On this day they were bright with flowers. The long procession walked past the bronze Athena and among the ruins and stopped before a little temple. It was bare and unbeautiful. It had been put up in a hurry after the war. Here was the sacred olive tree. Here was Athena's holy statue, made of olive wood. It had dropped from the sky, men said, ages ago. It had gone on a ship to Salamis during the Persian Wars. It was not beautiful, but it was the most precious thing in Athens, a gift from Athena's own hand. It was a post with a head carved on the top. The face was painted. Real hair hung from the head. A robe covered the post-shaped body. For hundreds of years Athenians had prayed at the altar before this statue, and it had grown dear to them. Now the priestesses of Athena stood on the temple porch to meet the procession. Maidens took down the beautiful robe from the ship and carried it to the priestesses, who took it into the temple. While the great crowd outside sang in praise of Athena, the priestesses took off the old robe and folded it and put it away in a treasure chest. Then they put on the new one, clean and shining. And when it was done, they prayed to the goddess. Then they went out again and received the other gifts for Athena. They carried them in and piled them by the altar. It was a beautiful mass of precious things. After that, they returned to the singing crowd, and all together marched on to the huge rock altar of Athena. Then the umpires of the games stepped out before the people. One of them carried olive crowns in his arms. Others had baskets holding small black and red vases. "Let Creon, the winner of the boys' foot race, approach," called one of the officers. A slender lad stepped forward. He held his head high. The breath came quickly through his nostrils. The officer lifted a wreath and put it on the boy's head. "I crown you Athena's victor," he said. That whole great crowd shouted with joy. "Creon, Creon, the Panathenaic victor." The officer gave Creon one of the vases. It was filled with olive oil. That oil was made from the fruit of Athena's holy olive tree. The boy took the vase and stepped back among his friends. They clapped him on the shoulder and talked to him 20 at once. It was a great thing to be victor in the Panathenaic Games. Meanwhile, the officers were calling up the other victors. And as everyone stepped back with his prizes, the happy crowd shouted. After it was all over, the priests walked to the altar. The men led up the animals of the sacrifice. "Sing praises to Athena. Give thanks to her for victory, give thanks for wisest counsel, for skill with loom and spindle, with sculptor's maul and chisel, give thanks for many blessings. Sing praises to Athena." So sang the crowd, and while they sang, the priests killed the animals with their holy knives. The winner of the torch race put his flame to the fuel on the altar. Soon the smoke of the sacrifice was rising to Athena, and the sweet smell of it was floating over the Acropolis. Then a herald stood by the altar and prayed, "May the gods bless the Athenians and the Plataeans." After that, all the people sat there by the altar and feasted, a great family as Athena's guests. They talked of her goodness, of the wars of Athens, of the officers of the city, of new laws, of the games just over. "Our great festival is finished," said a man to his neighbor. "I wonder what Athena will give us in the next 4 years to thank her for." "The wisdom of Pericles will be one thing, I hope," replied his neighbor. "I believe he has great things in his mind for Athens. We never had so wise an officer in the city before, I think." After the feast, some people hurried home. Some went away together for gay banquets. Others were off for the gymnasium. A few stayed and strolled about on the Acropolis. Pericles and Phidias walked slowly together. I am not willing, Phidias, said Pericles, that this beautiful procession shall any longer end on a ruined hill. This Acropolis is the head of Athens. It should be beautiful, as she deserves. Our walls are done. Piraeus is built. We are lords of the sea. We are rich, but we are not yet beautiful. Persian fire ate our temples and statues. It is time that we build them again. It is my dream to make Athens queen in loveliness. I wish her to be the shrine of beauty, where men shall come from all the world to fill their eyes and their souls. Years ago, men started the work, Themistocles and Cimon. See, there is the broad foundation where the temple of Athena was to rise. Here are the steps that were to lead up to it. The gods and the people need new temples. Let us get to work, Phidias. It is a glorious thing to do, said Phidias. The two men stayed for a long time, looking at the ruins, measuring distances. At last, as they went down the hill, Pericles said, "Talk with Athena tomorrow. He is, surely, the best architect in Greece. Make your plans, then get your artists together and begin the sculpture. I will send workmen to the quarries immediately." Soon after that, the Acropolis was busy with workmen. They were cleaning away the broken stones, measuring and marking lines on the rock platform. Stonecutters were chiseling blocks into shape. Drivers were urging their mules up the slope, dragging loads of marble. Miles away, on Pentelicus, quarrymen were splitting out great pieces and sending them crashing down the slides. Stonecutters were smoothing and squaring them. And all along the road, from Pentelicus to Athens, were creaking carts loaded with marble. Phidias's shop, too, was a busy place. As people passed it, they looked with glowing eyes at the baudoles. Behind that wall, they said, the beauties of Athens are being made. They watched the dozen men going in. There is a young sculptor from Argos, one said to another. There is one from Aegina, and another from Thebes. Peace or war makes no difference to artists. They come from cities that hate us, because they love beauty and Phidias. Then Phidias himself came around a corner. He was an old man, with bald head and stooping shoulders. He was staring far ahead. He is thinking of his statues, a watcher said to his friend, in a low voice. They say that Athena sends him visions in dreams. When Phidias went into the shop on this day, his pupils were already at work. Many young men had come from the cities of Greece to learn under him. Some few did good work. These he set to sculpturing a statue or a slab. The poorer workers he set to chiseling out the first rough shapes. Now there was a gay chatter and humming of songs as the mallet struck and the chips flew. Clay models stood on tables for the sculptors to work from. Phidias's charcoal sketches and paintings on wood lay about. The floor was white with marble dust. Corners were littered with broken pieces and castaway statues left unfinished. The men were in short chitons. Clothes, hair and skin were dusty with marble. Phidias stopped before a slab. A young man was working at it. He was sculpturing a woman carrying a basket. Phidias put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "I am afraid it will not do, Alcestor," said he, in a kind voice. "It is stiff and awkward. There are too many folds in the robe. People will stop to count them. They will forget what it is all about. It is the same with the hair. Hair does not hang in such precise locks, does it? You work carefully. Your hand is skillful. But you must train your eyes to see what is beautiful. Look at this figure." He led him to another slab. "You think of what this woman is doing. You think of the procession in which she walks. You remember the goddess whom she is going to worship. You do not notice her hair or the folds of her robe. Let us try again." So the unfinished slab was thrown into the corner. Phidias took off his long himation and stood in his short chiton. Then he set to work helping his pupil to start again. After a while, he went on to another piece of work. He stood before it, smiling, watching the sculptor. The young man was making his chisel fly, from foot to head, from waist to shoulder. He stepped quickly to and fro. He bent his head from side to side. Phidias laughed. "You are a dashing artist, Charicles. You remind me of Phaeton, who tried to drive the sun's chariot. You must learn to drive first. Steady, steady. Do not make a stroke before you know what it will do. See." He took the artist's chisel and mallet and chipped delicately at the marble. The arm is well shaped, but it is rough. The muscles stand too high. At first he talked as he worked, explaining. But soon he forgot everything except the statue. His pupil saw slowly grow under the master's tool a strong arm, where the muscles seemed almost to move. Some of the artists had gathered around to see Phidias work. At last, he stopped and looked up at them, smiling. "But I must go to my Athena," he said. He gave back the tools and walked away to a quieter corner. Here stood a tall figure wrapped in damp cloths. These he carefully unwound. A helmet of yellow clay peeped out, then a strong face, a raised hand. And at last the whole figure was bare. The rough edges of the robe, the shapeless hand, the smeared lips, showed that it was still unfinished. Quickly she leaped from the head of the counselor Zeus, shaking her spear and flashing her mail till high Olympus trembled in dread and the wide earth shook below at the maiden's strength, and the dark sea boiled and broke in foam. Chanted Pericles from the doorway. Phidias turned quickly. "Welcome, Pericles," he cried, "come in. It is a long time since you visited us." "Yes, this is Athena. She is wonderful," said Pericles. "She moves. I can tell from her alone what is happening in the whole picture." "But come," Phidias urged, "let me show you the rest of the work. Here is the Zeus that Alcamenes is chiseling. I shall put the finishing touches upon it in a few days. Here is the block of marble that is to make Iris. The stonecutter will begin to shape it tomorrow. This is the clay model. She is running to tell the world of Athena's birth. 3 nights ago I dreamed how to make her. The gods are helping me, Pericles. And you are helping Greece," Pericles answered. "These pupils of yours will go back to their cities and fill them with beauty, as you are filling ours." "I hope they will do something," said Phidias, "but they cannot do so much as I shall be able to do. They have no Pericles to put them to work. They can make beautiful statues, but they cannot make a whole beautiful city. That is the task you have set me. But come and talk while I work. I cannot answer, but I can listen." So, while the artist walked about his figure, carving the lips with his tool, smoothing the cheeks with his thumb, shaping the hand, stepping back to look at his work, Pericles sat on a block of marble and talked. "I can see this new Athens, Phidias," he said. "The temple of Athena and a new Erechtheum are glowing on the Acropolis. Gates, porches, steps are shining on the slope. Another theater on the hillside rings with music. Beautiful halls surround the marketplace. A temple honors every god. Themistocles saved Athens from the Persians. Themistocles and Cimon gave her walls and ships and power. We will give her beauty. That will be as great a service, I think. Our city wants good men. We will make them with beautiful statues, buildings, pictures. Perhaps the gods are good because they see nothing ugly in Olympus. Let us try it with men in Athens. Let them, when they pray, see statues, ceilings, walls, that remind them of Olympus. You have seen how happy people are when they are looking at a beautiful picture. Let us give them many such chances to be happy. And how people will love a city that shines with beauty. They will walk about happy, looking at temples and statues, and saying proudly to themselves, 'This is our city. She is worth the best we can give her, honesty, kindness, bravery.' I stood today gazing at your bronze Athena. My heart grew strong. I said to myself, my enemies, my worries, are only little things. I will keep on at my work and fear nothing. Surely her brave lips have put courage into many men. Surely her calm eyes have soothed many angry hearts. We need more such statues." Phidias turned from his modeling. "And one of them must be in the new temple," he said. "But what shall it be? I am all in the dark. I have made many Athenas, but I am not satisfied. This one must be truer than any one yet. Athena has so many sides. She is the fierce goddess of war. She is the loving one who teaches me to work with my hands. She is the giver of health. She is the goddess of wise counsel. She is wonderful always, but how is she best? Which way will make her people love her most, will best please the Savior, the lover of Athens? I cannot tell. Perhaps she will tell me in a dream." The work on the Acropolis had been going on for 7 years. Pericles was there watching one afternoon. Workmen were bringing up the pieces of sculpture for the metopes from Phidias's shop. Some were already there, and men were hoisting them into place. Others had been set, and scaffolds hung below them. Here artists were standing putting on the last touches of the chisel. Stonecutters were making the grooves in the tall columns. Others, at a little distance, were cutting joints on marble blocks. Pulleys and ropes were creaking. Mallets and chisels were pounding. Men were shouting orders. Pericles found Phidias in a little wooden shop. Here it was more quiet, but just as busy. Goldsmiths, with little hammers, were beating out plates of gold. Ivory workers were sawing great tusks into strips, or were carving the thin pieces. "And here you are making the beautiful Athena," Pericles said. Phidias looked up from the gold he was hammering. "Yes," he answered. "Did you see the core for it in the temple? It is all finished." "I saw it," laughed Pericles, "but I confess that it does not look to me much like a statue or anything else beautiful. I call it a tangle of wood and iron. But I will trust you to make it beautiful," he laughed again. "Everyone here seen is busy." "I have not even had time," Phidias said, "to go down to the shop and find how things are there." "I will go and see and report to you," said Pericles, and was off. As he walked through the door of the shop, it seemed to him a different place from the one he had been used to see. There was little ringing of chisels and noise of moving blocks. In the corners and along the wall stood finished statues. Some were wrapped in great cloths, but some were uncovered. Artists were working on these, tinting the white marble with soft colors. One of the young men turned as he heard a footstep. "Ah, Pericles," he cried. "You are in a glorified shop." Athena smiles at us, pointing to a marble statue. Zeus, Apollo, Hephaestus, Poseidon, still pointing here and there at different statues. "We are among the gods." "And you have lived among the gods for 7 years," said Pericles. The artist's gay smile vanished. Quickly his face flushed, and his eyes glowed. "Yes," he said softly, "and it has been a blessed life. I have had these calm faces looking upon me day after day. I have seen what a man can do with marble. I have seen Phidias dreaming, and making perfect beauty. I have felt my own hands grow skillful, and my eyes trained to see loveliness. I cannot tell which of these tilings has been best." Another artist had come up to listen. "It has been a wonderful time for us all," he said. "Oh, to do something worth doing. That is joy. I traveled for a little in Persia a few years ago. The idleness of it disgusted me. Themistocles did a good thing when he set you Athenians to work. And you have not forgotten your lesson. Work, work. You can feel it in the air of Athens. And we are not drudges either," said the other artist, an Athenian. "We work because we like to work. I have seen men in Egypt building a temple. They were driven like slaves. They must have hated that building. We love every stone that goes into this temple. We must thank the gods that we are Greeks," said Pericles. "And the pupils of Phidias," added the artist. The sun was sinking below the mountains. The new temple cast a long shadow on the hilltop. Workmen were gathering up their tools. The Parthenon was finished. On the next day, the festival of Athena would begin. 5 days later, the people of Athens would give this temple to the goddess and would worship there for the first time. A group of workmen stood off, looking at the building. "I am proud to be a stonecutter," said one. "Every stone, every joint, perfect," said another. "It will stand for 1,000 years." "We have laughed at Athena for his fussy notions," another said, "but it was worthwhile. Those columns have wings, they seem so light. Oh, the trouble we had getting the curve right. And the floor," laughed a fourth man. "Athena would not have it flat. If it is flat, it will not look flat," he said. "He was so particular about the curve that my eye has learned to see a bump half a hair high. But no one will think of those things when he looks at the building," said the first man. "People will see the rich color, the shining columns, the shadowed porch, the lifelike statues. Oh, it is perfect." Again, the Panathenaic procession wound up the front of the Acropolis. Every eye was big, every breath came quick. For years people had watched this temple grow, glistening white walls, columns, roof. Then they had seen the dark blues and reds painted upon the flat spaces. The great statues were lifted up and set where they belonged. The carved slabs were put into place. Scaffolds had hung upon the building for artists and sculptors to work from. At last, the scaffolds had been taken down. All this the people had seen daily as they worked in the city streets. But few had been close to the work. Guards at the gate had kept visitors away, but now they were to see everything. As the procession reached the top of the hill and started along the flat ground, every eye was on the Parthenon. More slowly and more slowly people walked, looking. They had no words to say. The building floated before them more lovely than their dream. The deep, still porches, the dashes of warm color, the calm, white columns stretching away from them, the story in tinted marble, all these things tied their tongues and drew their hearts out of them. Here in the pediment were Athena and Poseidon striving for Athens. There stood their horses and chariots, large as life. Poseidon angrily turned to go. Athena joyfully strode to step into her chariot. And the pediment was crowded with her happy friends. All these statues shone with bronze and gold and color. Below were the great white columns and the shady porch. The wall at the back was brightened with painted and gilded vines and bands. The porch stretched down the long side and all around the building. Under its roof, at the top of the flat wall, the people saw in painted marble relief the very procession in which they were marching. It was going, as they were going, toward the east. All this they saw in the soft shadow of the morning sun. Then they turned the corner and saw the eastern end in a flood of golden sunshine. Every blue and red background in meadow or pediment glowed. The gilded eaves, the golden ornaments on peak and on statues, burned. The level beams of the sun shot under the broad porch. They shone upon the gods seated there in marble relief above other columns, waiting to receive the procession. And in the pediment Athena had just sprung from the head of Zeus. And the gods stood about and watched with awe. The people could be silent no longer. They forgot the holy prayers to come. They shouted, "Athena, Athena." And for a minute they turned to talk among themselves. "I feel as though I were treading the meadow of Olympus and gazing at the gods themselves," said one. "It seems like a living thing," spoke someone else. After a moment of gazing, the procession began to march in through the great bronze doors. As soon as people passed the threshold, they fell silent, for there, far in the great, dim room, shone a statue. It was lit by one wide beam of sun. Tall as the room, Athena looked mildly down upon the hushed crowd. Her trailing robe, the helmet, the shield that rested at her feet, were all of gold, richly carved. The victory that stood in her outstretched hand was of gold. Her face and neck, her arms, her feet that pushed out from under her robe, were of soft-tinted ivory. In the half-darkness she shone softly, as the real goddess might have done, if she had stepped down from Olympus. Looking into her calm face, people forgot their griefs and worries. Many men remembered the words of the old poem, Pallas Athena does not permit me to tremble. Then the room rang with a great song from the people of Athens, Athena, we stand at thy feet, we lift our hands in prayer. Thy ears are filled with the prayers of the world, thy nostrils breathe the smoke of 1,000 shrines, and yet thou wilt not forget the town of thy name. Thou art wise, make us wise. Thou art brave, make us brave. Oh! Ward off war from our town and fill our walls with peace. Thy house shall be rich, Athena, with gifts, the walls shall be hung with picture and slab, the corners heaped with vases of gold, and incense burning above thy head, the columns hung with broidered cloth, the pavement piled with jars of wine, the dimness lit with shining gems, all these we will bring in our love for thee. Come down, Athena, and live in thy house, come down, Athena, and bless thy town.